Hey everyone, it's ariesjj back with you. Today we're going to be continuing on with the build tutorial progression series. We'll be looking at the alien coil, more specifically the stitched alien coil. I really didn't see a point in making two separate videos for them since the stitched alien just requires one additional step. So with that being said, let's go ahead and pop over to the build station and see what we're going to need for today's build. So first and foremost, you're going to need your wire. I'll be using Kidney Puncher's 26 gauge Canthal for my cores, 36 gauge stainless steel from Kidney Puncher for my wrap wire, and for my stitching I'll be using 40 gauge stainless steel. Now if you're wanting just to build the alien coil, you won't have to worry about the stitch wire, but the option is there. You'll also definitely need a drill for this. You'll need snips to handle your wire cuts, pliers to help straighten your cores. You'll definitely need an ohm meter to test your build. Ceramic tweezers, while not mandatory, do help out with the balancing and even burning of the coils after mounting. You're going to need a tool for your RDA. I'll be wrapping around the 2.5 millimeter mandrel on the coil master. You're going to need cotton and scissors for your wicking. And then you've got these three lovely tools. You can get away with using just ribbon to help balance out and keep your cores parallel and flat, but these make things a lot easier. You got a standard core lock, which you can find pretty much any hobby shop, any sewing shop, anything like that. You can find them on eBay for next to nothing. But then you have these. These were made by Bettino's of Subbies. I will have a link to these down in the description below. But what these are little baubles with precise holes drilled down the center of them. These are 3D printed. They come 6 to a set. He's based out of New York. He invented these, and they just help keep the coils nice and parallel while you're building. These over here are from USA Ohm Meter. They're called the Coil Assist. It's basically the same thing as the Alien Makers. They just have a slightly wider hole for the addition of more cores. I'll be using the Coil Assist today for the build. Now let's go ahead and pop on over to Steam Engine and figure out exactly what we're going to need as far as our ohm level and our core setup. Okay, so we're here on Steam Engine. I'm already in the Wire Wizard. We figured out that we're going to need a 2.5 millimeter inner diameter, and I'm going to go ahead and stick with 6 wraps for today's build. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that down to 6. I'm going to leave the leg length and the wrap spacing as they are. Now, as we did with our fused Clapton, we're going to set up today because an alien is basically just a really fancy Clapton. And we're going to set up the Clapton with parallel cores. Now, with our alien, we're going to be using 3 cores. So we're going to use the plus button down here below our parallel cores to add in a 3rd wire. Since we're going to be using Canthal, I'm just going to leave the Canthal the same, and we're going to change the core gauge to 26 gauge for all 3 of them. And then we have our wrap wire. Now, if you're doing just a simple Clapton, a simple alien, you can just go ahead and set this to whatever your Clapton wrap is, your alien wrap is. But if you're doing a stitched alien, you'll probably want to go ahead and set it up as a parallel. It's not going to be that big of a difference, but it does help out if you set it up properly. So I'm going to go ahead and set my main wrap as 36 gauge, and then my secondary wrap as the 40 gauge. So when we pop back up here, we see that our resistance per coil is going to work out to a 0.279. So in a dual coil setup, you're looking basically right around the 0.14 range. Now remember, this is just a guide. Always check your coils with a reliable ohm reader prior to firing these coils. You don't want to risk injuring yourself, your device, or anyone around you. So let's go ahead and get over to the build table and we'll start getting this coil built. Okay, so first and foremost, we're going to want to cut off 3 strands of core wire for the alien. If you want to do more than 3 cores, you're more than welcome to. Just realize that you're going to have to do math as far as what you're going to wrap your wrap wire around. you need to go with a 3-to-1 ratio. So if you're using 3 strands of 26 gauge, you're going to wrap your alien wrap wire around a single strand of 26 gauge. If you're doing 4 strands of 26 gauge, you're going to add up the width of each strand together and then divide that number by 3, and that tells you what gauge you're going to want to use for your wrap wire for that, and so on and so forth. But we're going to go ahead and pull out about a foot or so of our core wire, and we're going to cut off 3 strands. Oops, and that's wanting to sneak back in. Here we go. And then we're going to want to go ahead and straighten these. Now, if your drill chuck doesn't close all the way down, you're going to want to bend a little L in the end of your wire to grab on into the middle of 2 jaws on the chuck itself. So I'm just going to put that in there, tighten it down really good, and then just grab the other side with a pair of pliers. Just give it a few spins, run our fingers down, and let go. So your wire should end up nice and straight, and we're just going to repeat that process with the other 2 strands. Okay, so we've got our strands nice and straight. I went ahead and left this last strand in the chuck because we need to go ahead and get our initial Clapton wrap done so we can decore it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some of this 36 gauge, and if you're more comfortable wrapping underneath or overhand, this is where you need to figure out your Clapton wrap needs to be wrapped opposite of what your final wrap is going to be done. So if with me having more comfort wrapping over the wire, my Clapton wrap is actually going to be done under the wire because we're going to need to reverse that. So I'm just going to stick this wire in the chuck of the drill, just slide it in there, and just wrap this underneath that core wire. You want this Clapton to be as clean as possible. Okay, so for a dual coil setup, I try to Clapton about 10 to 12 inches. Once you're done, leave that wire still attached to the core and just reverse your drill from whatever direction you just Claptoned, and just kind of give it a little bit of a spin. And what that's going to do is that's going to loosen up that core, or loosen up that wrap wire from around that core, and allow you to slide that off much, much easier. Now, for identification's sake, I'm going to cut my lead just a little bit long. I left about an inch on that wire, and that's going to help me keep track of which side is which. And I'm just going to slide this off of that core, and you're left with a nice springy decored Clapton. And this is what you want. So let me go ahead and get that wrap wire roll back up. Now, if you are just wanting to do an alien, this is where you're going to stop, and then you'll skip the next step and just move on to the actual wrap itself. But since I'm doing a stitched alien, I'm going to pull out my 40 gauge stainless, and I'm going to pull off, give or take, about 2 arms lengths worth of wire. Okay, there we go. And I'm just going to give that a nice clean cut. And all we're going to do, I'm going to try to get this on camera and in focus. I may or may not have luck because I just reorganized my cameras. Whatever you do, make sure that it doesn't knot up like what this did. If it does, you're going to want to get that nice and straightened out before you continue on. You don't want any kinks in the wire. You don't want any knots or anything like that. You want as straight a wire as you can get. If you have to stretch it a little bit to get it to straighten out, by all means, go for it. So all we're going to do, and I'm going to try to zoom this in. Matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and swap over to the micro cam. So let me swap that over. Okay, so basically all I'm doing here is I'm going to take that 40 gauge that I've got, and I'm going to cut off that little piece that's rumpled up a bit. You want this wire to be as straight as you can get it. And we're just going to feed it into the back end of this D-cord Clapton. Now I'm going to try to do this on cam where it's in focus. I apologize if it's not. If I can see it. There we go. And we're just going to feed this on in. It's a lot easier if you go ahead and straighten out that D-cord Clapton to make it a nice smooth run into the as you're feeding this through. And what you end up with is it coming out on the other side. Let's see if I can get this in focus. There we go. This is that 40 gauge that we've gone ahead and pulled through. And you just want to keep those together. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to tie that 40 gauge off to where it's not going to accidentally slide back out. So I'm just going to twist those together and tie it in a little knot if I can keep a hold of it. The downside of not having fingernails. There we go, and I got that nice and tied off. It's not going anywhere. So we're just going to set that to the side while we get our cores prepped up. Now make sure that you don't get any knots or kinks or anything like that in that 40 gauge while you're getting all this prepped up, because that'll just cause problems later. Now some people would tell you to go ahead and stretch this out to make it about, each stretch to be about equal to 3 lengths of your core wire. I kind of prefer to have mine set up to where I do what's called the no stretch method. I just go by the tension on the wire and let it lay itself. So let's go ahead and go back up to the build cam, and I'll show you how to set your cores up. Okay, so now with our cores, if you had to bend an L in them, this is where I would recommend taking those out and cutting that L off, especially if your drill, if the chuck on your drill does not close completely. So I'm just going to take those, I'm going to cut those out. There we go. Let's get those picked up. That's the third one. And all we're going to do is we're going to take those 3 ends and we're going to bend the outside to its own side, and then the one in the middle, we're just going to bend it straight down, kind of a starburst, a little T. And we're going to fit each leg into its own section between the jaws of the chuck. And tighten that down. So what you end up with is it coming out like this with, like I said, one of those T joints coming out in between each side of the chuck. And that's going to keep your cores nice and leveled and parallel. But what we're going to do, since we're using these new coil assists and alien makers, is we're going to cut this off nice and even. And we're going to slide some of these coil assists on here. Now you want to make sure that your cores are perfectly lined up and that you didn't flip one of the cores around. And we're just going to slide them into the slots on these devices. Now, however many you want to use depends on the length of your strand. I generally use between 4 and 5. On this particular strand, I'm going to go ahead and use 5. Just slide these on. Now, I realize that this takes up some of your core wire, but it's not a huge amount, and the simplicity of what it does, it more than offsets wasting a little bit of core wire. So I've got the 5 on there, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slide these down, just kind of intersperse them amongst the cores, and I'm going to connect these core wires to my swivel setup. Let me get these snips out of the way. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap it and bend it over right there at the swivel, and I'm just going to pull that tight. So let me see if I can twist this just a little bit. There we go, and zoom in. And of course, it's not going to want to bend out far enough. There we go. Well, basically, you're just going to want to secure these, whatever method suits you best, to your swivels to where they're not going to come undone. There we go. So I've got those nice and tight. They're not going anywhere, so let me straighten this back. And zoom back out. Come on, zoom. There we go. Okay, so I've got my 5 cores. You want to have one right here at the chuck. You want to have the other one over here at your swivel, and then these are going to be kind of interspersed. Now, the one closest to your chuck, well, the second one in that's closest to your chuck, you're going to want to have it fairly close to the one right up against the chuck. And this is where your wrap is going to take place. And as you're wrapping, these are going to slide down. Meanwhile, they're going to keep those cores perfectly parallel and flat against each other. Okay, now that we've got this all positioned and in focus, basically what we're going to do is we're going to take our strand, we're just going to wrap it around the leg of one of these cores. We're going to give it a little bit of a stretch, just like so. Oops. I may have to snip that leg just a little bit. Yeah. There we go. We're just going to stretch that wrap wire out. We're going to trap it between these two devices. And again, going in the direction opposite of how you clapping the wrap wire, you're just going to spin this and wrap it up. And it's going to feed itself. Just try to keep it at about a 90-degree angle from your core wire, and it will go ahead and wrap itself right in place. Now, if you do happen to make a mistake and you double up or you gap it, kind of like how I'm doing right there, I let a bit too much tension off of the line, and so it's kind of spiraling out. There's really no fixing that. You basically just have to keep going and just add a little bit more tension back to it. Okay, so we're going to wrap this around a 2.5 millimeter mandrel. We're putting it in the black and gold goon from Lost Arts and 528 Customs. That's what we're going to mount it in today. So we're just going to get this lined up. It actually wraps really, really easily, unlike a lot of the other advanced wires that tend to spring back. This one, with the exception of that first wrap that you want to get nice and tight, it actually folds over really nicely. So there's 4, 5, and 6. And then we'll just offset that leg like we normally do. And then repeat for the same for the second coil. Okay, so when you go to mount this in the goon, the key to mounting in a goon is to make sure that you tighten your screws down evenly. But what a lot of people don't think to do is when you're going to put your the legs of your coils through the post slots, if you put them in individually, like so, you can see that you've got that little bit of leg hanging off, and like most RDAs, you would just trim that up and then start installing the second one. Well, with the goon, if you uninstall that one and put your second coil in, you can get those legs pre-trimmed as well without having to fight it with that second coil in there. So now you've got 2 sets of coils with legs perfectly trimmed, and then it's just a matter of sliding in that other set and then tightening down the screws in an even pattern. Just a few twists on each one, move on to the next one. You don't want to put all your pressure on one screw and then go back through and just keep tightening it down until they're firmly clamped in. Okay, and just about got it. Okay. And we'll get these leveled out, pull them away from the deck just a little bit. And there we go. Let's get this focused in. Oops, sorry about that, guys. And that's what you're looking for. Nice and beautifully mounted. One of these days I'll get myself a camera crew that can do all my autofocusing and all that for me. But until then, sorry to make y'all seasick. So this is clocking in at about a 0.136-ish, 0.137-ish. We figured that it would come in right around that 0.14 mark, so we're pretty spot on. Now today we're going to be putting it on top of the SP Custom Vapors SX350J V2 Phasma box. Now I had this custom made just for me. But yeah, if you're looking for a good SX chip based box for your custom work, check out SP Customs. I'll put his link down below for you. But we're just gonna pulse this in slowly. Working out any hot spots that appear. Now I have a lot of people question me on how do I get the colors in my coils for my Instagram posts and whatnot. And the answer is simple. With stainless steel, if you pulse it nice and slowly, you'll get, which I didn't pulse this one slowly by any stretch, but you'll get that nice coloration going on with it. I'll do a video strictly on color pulsing so you guys can see, how that works out. Okay, and we said that it was going to be right around a 0.14, and we can see this is 0.14, spot on. So we're going to let that cool down. We're going to get our cotton prepped up and ready to go. This is a 2.5 millimeter coil, so going by my normal measurements, I'm going to use about 1/4 of the width of a pad of Muji cotton for each coil. Always making sure to take off that front and back matted portion of the cotton because it doesn't wick real well. There we go. Double check. Okay, this coil's still a little bit warm. I'm going to pause it, let them cool down. We'll be right back to wick these up. Okay. Yep, nice and cool there. So we're just going to twist the end of our cotton a little bit between our thumb and index finger, and we're just going to roll it on through. Brace it with your thumb. Give it a nice little wiggle back and forth, and snip the tails according to how much cotton you need for your RDA. And repeat the process with the other side. And then using a small little screwdriver or tweezers, whatever you have handy, just fluff out those tails and just tuck it tightly against the walls of the RDA, leaving plenty of room underneath the coils for airflow. And again, make sure that you have plenty of room up underneath the coil. That gives you the airflow that you need. You should be able to see all the way through to the other side. And we're just going to drip this up. Throw a little bit of wizard tears on here. Get that coil nice and saturated. And let that soak while you saturate out the tails of your cotton. As always, it doesn't take a whole lot. You want your cotton to be saturated but not drowning. The more juice you put, the more likely you're going to get spit back from it. Okay, and we're just going to pulse it a little bit, work it into the center of that coil. And what this does is it breaks in that cotton nice and slowly. One more dousing and we should be good to go. Okay, so let's go ahead and get the top cap on, adjust your airflow, and I'll meet you back up top. Okay, so we've got it juiced up, wicked up, the whole 9 yards. I've got this at 80 watts because I like mine a little bit on the warmer side. 3.34 volts. I've got the airflow closed down to right about half. Oh man, that's a good juice. It ramps up quick. It puts out an immaculate flavor. It really does. It's not a difficult coil. A little bit of time, a little bit of practice, a little bit of wire. Well, maybe a lot of wire, but that depends on you. But you'll get it too. If you have any questions, by all means, leave them down below in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. I put out new videos every Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, so make sure that you check back to see what's next on the list. Remember, it's not the cigarettes you smoke, but the ones that you don't smoke that matter. I don't care if you're vaping a point .1 or a 10mm coil as long as it's safe. And remember, at the end of the day, the only one that matters is you. It's your vaping journey. Enjoy it. So on that note, I'm going to cut on out of here. Enjoy, but do it safely.